Hello and welcome. This is game 4 of set 6 PBE tournament.
He ends up getting a bow. He might still slam a Rage Blade, go an AD comp, but maybe GV8 is trying to do what he did last game, which is, play for the AP mid game, play kind of uncontested and be able to hit what he needs to hit, play consistently. He does get a Malzahar out of an orb that is going to be huge because Malzahar as an early carry is very powerful, and he has 2 Arcanists here. He just needs to look for a front line and be able to round out this like early game comp basically. We saw him last game. He built Death Cap Shojin on the Malzahar and did really well with it. He also has a Poppy here. Maybe he can lean into that, go for the early Yordles. He has 2 Poppies. Go for the early Yordles, play for tempo since you can get upgraded Yordles pretty quickly with the Yordle trait, and then also play for some econ here as we look at his first augments. Celestial Blessing is the very generic power that everyone goes for. It's only 10% Omnivap at tier 1, but it's still a lot of power because you can get healing from it that you otherwise might not get through your itemization.
That's true. Has also the opportunity to start to get pairs and perhaps reinforce his front line. Does have a good mixture of different synergies as well to go deeper into. Has more Arcanist, has the mutant possibility. I don't know if we actually saw a very quick confirmation about what Grand Vice has available to him for mutant buffs this game in the lobby. So we'll have to check on that in a moment here. So you brought up the fact that Malzahar is a great 3 cost to get out of your early drops. Are there any other standout 3 drops in your mind that are really good to get at stage 1?
Yeah, I think Cho'Gath is one of those ones that, like, if you get early, you have to think about, do I want to commit to this Cho'Gath or not? You can use that Cho'Gath to just farm all the early minions and get a couple early stacks. Then that Cho'Gath will start ramping up really quickly. And if you commit to it, you'll have a very strong Cho'Gath 3 by the end of the game. And so the way Cho'Gath works is at Cho'Gath 3, he no longer has a stack on his number of he no longer has a cap on his number of stacks, sorry. So he can go infinite, basically. And by that point, he's dealing a ton of damage with his Feast. You'll have a really, really healthy Cho'Gath. As we hop on over to Dasik here, playing 3 Yordles, probably playing this with a Giant Slayer slammed on the Ziggs, probably playing this as an econ trait. Mentioned this last game, but Yordle is a very interesting and different type of econ slash reroll comp trait. Typically, with econ and reroll comps, you kind of want to play for early econ. You kind of want to not really go for streaks. You don't want to jam levels. But for Yordles, because the trait gives you so much board power by upgrading your Yordles, it's more of a tempo trait, a tempo econ trait in that way too. And so by playing this, he has the 2-star Ziggs already. He has a lot of strength on his board, and he's still able to push levels and go for that. But he still also get the econ from getting the free Yordles that come out of the trait that he can sell back for gold.
Yep, that's right. And we've seen Yordle's openings be okay. It doesn't don't be surprised to see if Day6 sticks on these Yordles to go kind of like a win 2, lose 2 situation. Because there's going to be people who have big boards. Wow, look at this. 2 Garen 2s. This is exactly what happened to Dasig just the previous game where he was getting flooded with Garens. Now, the difference is that Sato also has a tempo augment to support it as well, the Cybernetic Heart, so that way that any unit that's holding a component gets additional attack damage and health. So in terms of just raw stats, that's just a lot to come back from. The one last cast from Ziggs able to at least kill one of the Garens, so reducing a little bit of the damage dealt to Dasik for losing this round. So at least Dasik can come away with that.
It's really funny, Dasik facing the comp that he basically played last game at 2-2, I believe. Dasik already had like 8 Garens, and so here Best Sato with 6 Garens and a Kassadin. The Cybernetic Augment is doing so much for him here because Protector's the shield scales off of health, and so having those components spread out, the Cybernetic Augment grants all of those units with components on them an extra 300 health, and so by having all those extra stats makes that shield bigger, and just scaling off of that is going to be really good for him here. Well, I'm interested to see if he ends up committing to this comp or not. He does have all upgraded protectors, so I'd be surprised if he doesn't. This comp, has proven that it is really strong, but he doesn't have the Warmogs early. This is kind of the comp where you really want to have an early Warmog, some early defensive items for your Garen. Even though like he can use offensive items, we did see how Dasik, even though he hit the early Garen 3, he didn't have a Warmogs on the Garen, and the Garen ended up bleeding out a bunch of health for him in the mid game.
We'll see. If he does end up combining both those Garens, they'll fuse together the sword and the bow to make it Giant Slayer. I'm not sure that's exactly what he's looking for either. Sato has also not hit the level button whatsoever, so very much likely that he's going to at least strongly consider the possibility of rerolling, unless everything in the game from this point forward tells him not to. So he immediately picks up Garen number 7. Okay. So how does it work if 3 Garens are on the board and they all combine into a 1 unit?
That is an interesting question. I imagine that I believe the priority is random. So basically, the 2-star Garens will combine, or no, sorry, the 2-star, the 1-star Garen will combine first. It'll become a 3 2-star Garens on the board, and then they will combine. And so likely just randomly 2 of those items will combine. And so that's not what Sato wants here. He's going to want to control that a little bit. And with these types of players, they're all top challenger players at this point. They're all going to know how to manipulate their item choices here. But Sato here is going up against Tex, who has both an Innovator and Phony Frontline and is level 5, which means he has 7 units on the board against Sato's 4 units. It's going to be a very heavy unit disadvantage here, but his units are so strong with having multiple upgrades and the augment.
Quality over quantity, I guess, in life and in TFT, at least in the early game. Tex able to not get that stuff onto the board, but not actually end up winning. Speaking of winning, or rather not winning, Soju was on a streak, but lost it at 2-5. His augment seems to be the Phony Frontline as well. He's playing an early Shaco. Now, Shaco has been nerfed, and a lot of people were very high on him in the very beginning because they felt like he was basically similar to Galaxy Shaco with the Dark Star Assassin, and or Infiltrator rather, and he would go to the back line and immediately assassinate quickly. What's your read on Shaco? Do you think people are overblowing the nerfs, or do you feel like right now he's as awkward as people are making out to be?
Yeah, that bug fix ended up being a pretty big nerf to Shaco, but I also think that a lot of players are kind of anchored on what Shaco used to be in set 3, but he's very, very different now with his trait structure. So in set 3, with Darkstar, the final unit alive would have a ton of AD and AP, so Shaco would be really, really strong without offensive items, and so you would build things like RFC, Bloodthirster, and GA. You just basically wouldn't go for any real offensive items. But now Shaco has Syndicate, which grants him those defensive stats and not those offensive stats. So then you'd want to build a very heavily offensive build. You want the Infinity Edge, the Deathblade, those types of things, because he gets naturally from Syndicate, he gets those defensive stats like Armor, MR, and Omnivamp. So you don't want to build Bloodthirst, so you don't need to build Guardian Angel necessarily. He's kind of set up to go or the 1v9 naturally, and so you just want to give him enough damage to be able to pull that off.
Ah, interesting. So Kent perhaps challenging us the way we build Shaco is what's creating some of that friction, and we'll see, because there are a couple of damage tools in Soju's repertoire. Soju, by the way, not selling to 20 despite holding a lot of gold onto his bench. He has a pair of Samiras for the challenger and perhaps can transition to it. Finds a Swain in the shop, so he has 3 Imperials in the form of Talon, Samira, and Swain, and can transition that way. And he doesn't have any 2-stars, so he's not super committed to this. Also finds a pair of Innovators and can lean into that as well. So much direction, no 2-stars. This is a tough spot to be in if you're in Soju's spot.
Tough spot indeed. He does have 2 Innovators on his bench, so he's maybe considering that. I'm a little bit surprised here that he doesn't transition out the Warwick for the Swain here, at least to let him make 20 gold. He's considering selling the Singed for gold here. He slams the Locket, going for that early power. We've seen Soju this tournament. Typically he plays pretty greedy on ladder, but this tournament he's been playing very much for the early game. He streaks very hard basically every single game. Slamming this Locket here gives him a lot of board power as well, and we see him sell one of the Singed units for that 20 econ threshold. I would be surprised to see if he. I mean, I'm interested to see if he ends up going for this Samira because he does have a Samira pair. He does have the Swain. You know, he can easily if he hits a Samira too, it's going to be a really strong mid game board. And since Soju is playing for tempo, that'd be a really interesting transition.
He has to roll. A lot of people are going to 6. Soju hits Samira 2 as well.
Oh, there we go.
Tex hits a Yone.
Wow.
Now, Tex is playing very tempo heavy. Look at his Ezreal items, for example. Oh my gosh, another epic unit comes in. It's Janna. Oh, and we have a Zillion too. So we do have some hits here. Another Innervator in the shop. If you want to replace Ezreal, you could, but then you would lose the scrap bonus. I guess you do have the 1-star Singed at the same time. Tech's moving a little bit slow, and understandably so. There's a lot to consider. Does he want the Zac, for example? Need more Chemtech and have a better front line? Does he want to pick up this Heimerdinger instead? I have to imagine the Heimerdinger is at least more desirable than the Singe to hold on. If not, then I would trust that Tex is just selling the 20 here and doesn't care about picking up this Heimer because it costs a little bit too much gold to do so. Losing this fight, unfortunate. Toric is going to be able to stabilize with that Kog'Maw too. But as we go to the 3-3
Wow.
choice here for the augments, gets item grab bag, chooses not to go into the invention, and a very quick choice of that component here.
Yeah, taking that item grab bag here is going to be really good for tempo. Tex really wants to play for tempo here, as you can see, and he has the scrap in, which the extra 2 components is actually really good for him because it helps increase the shield that scrap trait gives, which is based on the number of units items that you have on your units. Another really high tempo trait here. And last fight we saw the strength of the Kog'Maw there. Kog'Maw in the mid game is such a good carry, can use such flexible items. We might actually see them play for a Kog'Maw 3. It is a Voidborn mutation, which means that at the tier 1 3 mutant, it's basically Predator, so at 25% health, they will execute the units that they deal damage to, and at 5 it'll be Void, which is converts 50% of their damage to true damage, and that's really strong. Kog'Maw can use that really well, especially with the Runettes Hurricane that it has.
That's right. Just getting early damage going on, and just look at this Samira 2 from Soju. Now, I do think that Samira carry is very powerful from exactly where Soju is, which is snowballing it. We'll see whether or not he's able to capitalize on it further moving forward, as Tex does end up taking a loss here. As we enter stage 3 carousel, Chi2 has now crossed the halfway point at 50 life. Let's see if there's any impactful champion combinations on the carousel. There's a Lux with a tier, for example. We have been seeing AP struggle a lot. And look at this, not even really acknowledging it. Needs to finish other items instead. Oh, Chi2 look a little bit lost in terms of what he wants here. He's taking the sword, I guess because he really feels like he needs offensive components of some kind. Chi2 at the very bottom of the standings at 7 points, 8th place. Has to figure out some game plan to turn it around, because if he takes a bottom finish here, there's just pretty much no chance he has whatsoever to even maybe crack the top 4 in standing.
Yeah, it looks like he's really leaning into the Socialite, the Fiora here. He has Duet, which makes it so that the Socialite hex multiplies itself. There's 2 hexes on his board, one for Samira and one for Fiora. This is actually a really good spot to play if he wants to lean into the Fiora, eventually find a Yone, then you have a double carry here. The 2 of them, we've seen them perform really well over the course of the tournament. If you're able to get 3 items on both of those carries, you know, even if one gets locked down, one gets killed, the other one can still clean up the rest of the board. They're both really high DPS, strong carries. He does have the death cap on the Fiora, which is interesting. You know, not something that players would naturally like lean towards, but it's actually really strong. You see there, the true damage, 157 per hit times 4. That's 600 damage in true damage every single ult, which is really powerful. So if he's able to get something like a Jolt Gauntlet on that Fiora, she can actually deal out a lot of damage every single ult. It's also really good for items like, he can also look for items like Hand of Justice, which helps Fiora heal both off of the physical damage portion and the AP portion. But Chi2 here is still losing fights. He's on a 6 loss streak. He really needs to play for first here. So maybe he's going for a first raid strategy. He's going to probably do a gigantic roll down on 7. He's Gonna go for another loss into Wolves here to help get that +3 gold loss streak. He's also almost to 7 already, so he's gonna be leveling, hopefully able to make a really strong transition and hit some 2-star 4 costs so that he can stabilize.
It's going to be below 40 life if he loses this battle before even seeing the end of stage 3. You can look at his streak as well. He's at a 6-loss streak, meaning that he actually won a round, and might be also why he's not swimming in the gold. So we'll see whether or not he's able to get a stable board. We'll see whether or not he's able to really capitalize on these augments with social life. 34 HP after losing to GV8. In terms of streaks, we also have one snapped at the very top. No one is streaking whatsoever here. Everyone's running a little bit cold, so we'll see how it ends up shaping up. Let's go ahead and hop over to Sologasong, who did find that early Jhin. And it seems like that's helped stabilize the stage 3, but hasn't been enough raw power just yet. And we'll see just how impactful his drops are and how impactful his role is. At stage 4-1, you typically see players who don't have their cemented board for stage 4 try to build something really powerful. You want to think at the beginning of each stage, how can I build my best board that will prepare me for the rest of the stage going into the following checkpoint? So let's see what Sologasong is able to get.
I also want to call it right here. Sologasong did something very smart, which is when he picked up his orb, he got some units on his bench, and he sold those units before picking up the other orbs. And so what that did was, if he had any other units in those orbs, if he had a full bench, they would have been converted to gold. So he was hoping that maybe those would grant him a 4 cost. Oh, he hits a Kaisa at level 7. Also hits a Seraphine too. Those are big hits. Now he has to make a decision here. Does he want to transition off of the Jhin and onto the Kaisa and play more of a challenger comp? He does have 2 Yones. He also has 2 Jhins though.
I mean, he does have 2 Jhins, but he has the challenger already prepared for that. And in terms of the quality of the items, I do think that it's a lot easier to build into Yone Kaisa than it is for Jhin. I feel like Jin's a little bit more specific in terms of the item range that you were looking for. Although I'm sure some people would probably argue and say that he's more flexible than people give him credit for. So I'm kind of torn as well. You can see Sogol saying with a little bit of a sigh because it feels like sometimes the game gives you too many options, and that ends up making you feel like you're in danger of making the wrong one. It also means that Solo might be not be done rolling. He finds another legendary. He finds Jace and Kaisa in back-to-back stage rounds. Wow, and a Fiora.
He has so many options. A lot of direction. Oh, this is too much direction. Where does he go from here? He's going to keep on rolling, try to find cement down what he wants. He does have 5 Innovator, which is pretty huge. This bear will grant 80 in AP every time it casts. Pretty good setup that he has right now.
Where's the Jinx? Just get all the late game carries.
Yeah.
At that point, you got to figure it out. Okay, we're going to put in the Kaisa, use the Jewel Gauntlet Hodge. Jewel Gauntlet plus the Giant Slayer. Usually Hodge is a really nice way to complete this trio, the triumphant of what you want to really give, because some sustain would be good for Kaisa. It's taken down immediately. Soju, again, with that Samira carry, just having high tempo. Yes, he's not on the dominant win streak. He also did roll a decent amount of gold, which I think is a correct position to be in, given that Samira, while it is a stable carry for stage 4, isn't single-handedly going to dominate the rest of the stage as people start to get things like that, their Yones and Fioras online. So I think it's a good call from both ends here. And I do not envy the position that Solo's in because it's very tough. Let's go ahead and switch over to Toruk, who is playing the 5 mutant combination. Once more, did we get confirmation on what the mutant was for this game?
Yeah, so it's this game is Voidborn. So at tier 3, it's going to be executing units that you deal damage to who are under 25% health, and then at 5, which he has in right now, you get the execute and you deal 50% of your damage as true damage. So he can ignore a lot of defenses. This is really good for Cogmob, especially with Runan's Hurricane, because he'll be hitting multiple units and able to execute multiple units at a time. You see there, he executed the Vex from very high health, 362 true damage crit right there, doing a lot of damage. He's one off of Cogmoth 3 too, really, really strong right now.
That's right. Not to mention that if he gets an ability to have an emblem to make mutant emblem with the cloak, he can turn Urgot into a mutant. And let me tell you something, mutant Urgot with the Voidborn is quite possibly one of the strongest combinations that you could possibly ask for in the late stage of the game, because there's just so much attack speed that goes out. Urgot's damaging so many things with the Runan's Hurricane. And all of a sudden, I don't miss Kog'Maw whatsoever. Urgot 2, Kog'Maw 2. That's just as good as Kog'Maw 3, and if not better.
Yeah, certainly. And then he gets a bow here too to round out his Kog'Maw's items. You can either build another Runettes Hurricane to help spread that damage even further, but he's probably going to go for a Rage Blade here. Help Kog'Maw, scale up into the game. There you go. He slams the Rage Blade. He's continuing to slow roll at 7. He's bleeding out a little bit. He's at 37. He really wants to hit. I think he'll be going past 50 here. Yeah, he's going down, digging it down. He's 1 off, so he should really just commit, and try to stabilize here. Try to hit that Kog'Maw 3. He's also looking like he might be going for a Cho'Gath 3, which will help him build a really strong front line. Even without items, the Cho'Gath can, if he can kill 1 unit per fight, he is gaining 2% max health and can really build up a lot of effective health to buy time for his Kog'Maw here. But let's look at his Kog'Maw dish out this damage and heal back up.
Oh, able to take down the Kaisa before Cheeches get it online. What's the level 7 Kaisas across the board here? Not to mention the Torek also rolled past his own legendary as well that was only applicable here. So it's a very tricky, the Solo Gasong, I was able to do that as well. Both players who hit the legendary still not stable. Check back in with Torek momentarily. Let's take a look at the 4-6 augment. Stand United was immediately catching Day 6 Eye, which gives you stats based off every active trait. And instead, chooses the Sunfire board. Very understandable choice. You Sunfire, or rather, you apply a healing debuff and percentage damage on the entirety of your opponent's board, which is pretty powerful given how good some of that front line is in this game. And there's just an abundance of healing currently in Gizmos and Gadgets.
Yeah, having that anti-heal is so key to the late game because so many players are running healing on their units. A lot of players both build items or take Celestial Blessing or take Thrill of the Hunt. All of those augments will give you healing. I'm both really shocked and kind of impressed by Day6's board here. He went 8 on 4-5 on stage 4-5 and still has 50 gold, which means, he really took advantage of the Yordle trait here as an economic trait. The part that surprises me is that he's using an AD Ziggs as the item holder and still able to maintain this much health. He's at 71. He's not like fully win streaking, but he has been taking either really good losses or winning some of the fights. And just really surprising to see how much Day6 has econed up while also having an AD Ziggs item holder.
Yeah, and it makes sense because he has the innovators as well to provide some frontline support, and then that because he has Clockwork naturally in, he's prepared with the Jhin and the Camille. So Dasik has what it should be rumbling to a very solid composition, and he has what feels like a ton of gold to work with, virtually guaranteed to hit what he wants. Now, of course, that's what it should be on paper. We've seen some incredibly unlikely things happening in TFT before in this kind of spot. So don't count your eggs before they hatch, Dasik. And that's kind of why he's rolling now, to see if he can get early peaks, make it simplify a little bit easier, start the transition immediately, and then go from there.
Yeah, and you see he's putting together the pretty standard Jhin comp here, except, he does have 5 Clockwork because of his augment. But pretty standard Jhin comp here, as in, he's running the Seraphine, he's running the Orianna. He's probably going to try to find a Janna to help support this Jhin. They're all really good ways to help your Jhin sustain throughout the fight. You just need him to get that cast off, help him get that 4th hit and deal a ton of damage. He finds an MF2 for Sniper. I'm curious to see how he'll reposition here as well. Is he going to try to greed that corner Hex to give Jhin some more the Socialite Hex, or is he just going to keep the Seraphine there to hopefully heal his entire team? When Seraphine hits the team, it also grants the entire team attack speed, which is great for Jhin because Jhin converts that to AD and really, with Sniper, helps him one-shot the units in the backline.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if he's able to capitalize on that. In the meantime, chasing down the Fiora with the Zephyr, and while there's some pretty good damage on the Fiora, she doesn't have frontline support. It's Solo Gasong dead. He is big damage from Dasik to eliminate Solo, but Solo's at least able to avoid 8th place. Chi2 with another bottom finish. Brutal for our Chinese finalist for today, and eliminates him from contention to get anywhere near the top of the standings here, as Sato is going to be the next player that we hop on board with. He is on the chopping block here. With Torek streaking at 37, it feels like Sato has a pretty significant gap between him and the rest of the lobby, as he is trying to see if he can get these academies online. And I will say that Academy, if you give it enough time, does scale pretty deep into fights. But I also feel like right now with Sato's lack of frontline, he's got a 2-star Leona that has 0 items and a 1-star Yone. He backlines his Garen as an attempt to try and maybe catch some of the backline momentum. But is this enough here for Sato to stabilize?
Yeah, unfortunately, Sato, he was in a really good spot hitting that Garen 3 relatively early, but he doesn't have any defensive items for that Garen. Um, and also, I think there was a little misplay here in positioning. You really want the Leona next to the Garen. When Leona calls down her shield, she grants armor and MR to all the units within that, all the allies within that circle. And you really want to give that to Garen because he has a lot of health and he has a protector shield and he can really multiply that to a lot of effective health. He really should be trying to take advantage of that. What's interesting here, though, is that we're seeing Sato play the Academy version of this same comp that Dasik played last game. But Dasik played it with Assassins, and Torque is playing it with Lux here. It's actually a pretty good iteration of this comp because if he did have tanky items on Garen, Garen can stall for a very long time and let the Academy units scale up. Lux is really good at getting repeat casts and scaling up the rest of the Academy units as well. So very smart usage here. Just didn't end up having the items to really back it up.
Oh no, Sato looks very close to taking the 6th place, and it almost seems like nothing's going to stabilize him. Seems like the Academy is not going to work out here. Does have a Yone too. What looks like to be an Academy emblem on him. That's interesting. Is that the shot in the arm that Sato needs?
Yeah, he hits a Yone too. He's going to have which Yone Academy is he missing? He's missing Yumi and he's missing Graves. He just needs to find one of those, and he'll have 8 Academy, which is a ton of AD and AP. Not sure if that's going to be enough for him. I think he still needs to position to buy himself enough time. But we'll see if he's able to pull off that 8 Academy and able to stabilize or not. As we hop on to Tex here, who is running Challenger double Shojin Orianna. That unit is going to be casting a lot. But we're seeing, another one of those Fiora Yone double carries. Hits the Orianna too. 3 items on Yone, 3 items on Fiora. This is a lot of damage that's going to be coming out. A lot of DPS. And he's able to supplement his weaker frontline with the phony frontline, which is really good for him here.
Yes, just a little bit of stall, and that extra couple seconds gives time for that double Spear of Shojin to give 16 mana per auto. Here comes the first shockwave. We'll see whether or not she's able to chain that together. In the meantime, Fiora and Yone working on that front line, but there's just so much HP. Not to mention, not 1, not 2, but 3 Ionic Sparks onto the field, and they all are instances of damage from the mutant, so he gets instantly executed anytime he's at that damage threshold. Not to mention, of course, the true damage being pushed through by Torque's mutants. Very, very powerful board coming out from Torque. He does end up having Shriek Snap, but looks like he's right back on track to make top 4. Taking a look at how things are shaping up at the end of stage 5 here, I don't know if Tex can be in this top 4. Both him, Soju, and Sato seem like they're grasping for a chance to sneak into that top 4. Meanwhile, point leader Dasik alongside GV8. These are 2 of the players to watch at the beginning of each set, and for good reason. They're number 1 and they're both tied for first in points. They're both top 2 in this lobby.
Yeah, I also just want to call out here that the challenger trait, what it does is when you kill a unit, the challenger unit doubles their attack speed bonus for a certain amount of seconds. So what Tex really should be trying to do here is put the 2 carries together. As Tex knocks out Best Sato with the Academy comp, not being able to stabilize there. But yeah, you really want to put the Fiora and the Yone together so the 2 of them can take down units in unison. And as they take them down, they'll both be getting a ton of attack speed and rushing more and more units down. Kind of like Shadow, if anyone has played set 2. You kind of want to position so that your units deal DPS to the same units altogether. And same with the Orianna, she targets the largest clump. You do want to clump up your units in a certain way so they all get shielded and they CC the units that are around them, so it helps your Fiora and Yone get some more time.
Yes, there is a little bit of weird anti-synergy with Orianna and Janna, how they kind of one puts everything together based off the clump and one separates. So you have to kind of be very mindful of that. Really great observations, Kent, as we do see Soju and hop on board with him. Can he find a way to stabilize his front line? Now, he does have a couple of unusual things. Like, he has an Arcanist heart or soul rather, with no Arcanists in, no Victor to really tie everything together. So it feels like Soju's effectively playing down Hextech Augment compared to everybody else. Trying to rearrange, knows that people are targeting things like the Socialite Hex. And this is a very intimidating board to go up against from Toric, who has the mutants online that Kog'Maw protected, even with the spell shield to potentially stop any CC from hitting that corner of any capacity. The Urgot chopping through the front line finally, but is it too late? I think Kog'Maw is fully online, and Soju now down to his last life. How did the rest of the lobby fare? Wait, GV8 all of a sudden took 2 immense losses, and GV8 went from 2nd in HP all the way down to 5th. We still have our game on our hands.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I wonder what GV8's running. You know, maybe he wasn't able to make a solid transition at level 8. Maybe he tried to go fast 9, but we're seeing here Soju, you know, leaning back into the Urgot carry that he's very used to. Urgot on Jinx. Jinx with the Ionic Spark, which is actually not that bad because she lands in the middle of a clump and it gives everyone minus 50 MR, which helps herself deal a ton of damage. As he faces here the Tex comp, you know, the Orianna, the Yone, the Fiora, still separating them, but they still deal so much damage. We'll see if the Fiora here is able to take out this Urgot here, who's keeping himself alive. Oh, so close.
Yeah, just too much damage across the board. I think just one carry from Soju versus the 2.5 from Tex, and that's an elimination. But Soju sneaks into top 4 by 1 HP. Every single kill mattered for Soju. And GV8 unfortunately takes that 5th place. We have our top 3. We have Toric from France, who's riding high off that mutant. We talked about how this might be one of the most powerful mutant synergies available in the repertoire of mutant. And you can see why exactly that is. He's streaking a really good spot. Oh, Toric taking out the Innovator to kind of make positioning a little bit more obscure for people who scout him.
Well, that was a very smart, like, you know, small thing to do to just not show that there's a Socialite Hex on his board. Still was able to get predicted, of course. These, you know, very high mechanical players here. But you also see that Cho'Gath dealing a ton of damage, just converting half of that really high base to true damage.
Gosh.
Oh my. Yeah.
Still way too much power from Day6 backline. The Jhin just needs time to really get his sniper online, and you can just see with that Giant Slayer takes down Cho, takes down the 3-star Kog'Maw like it's nothing. Toric finds the mutant emblem, can turn one of his non-mutants into it, and even have some room for flexibility. So, for example, can take down, say, this Malzahar or this or this 2-star Kassadin and find an opportunity to insert even more powerful units into his composition.
It's going to come down a lot to positioning here. You know, as he faces Tex, can he bait the challenger units away from his carry? I would think that maybe you even want to give up, you know, stop greeting this Socialite Hex and really give up the position there to help your unit, you know, stay safe and away from the Fiora, who can one-shot the Kog'Maw. Because if the Kog'Maw has enough time to ramp up with the Rage Blade, can really kill, can really dish out a ton of damage and kill all of the challenger carries who are relatively squishy. He just needs to get them to 25% health and he'll execute them.
That's right. He's got Spark and Shiv off his Thieves Gloves, by the way, so really powerful ways to activate the mutant buff. If his front line can stall, though, Fiora is now working with the Kog'Maw. The Blade Waltz does end up being able to just barely do enough damage to, not able to actually kill. And Toric ends up swinging the fight just enough, executing that Fiora, and as a result gets that win over Tex. And now we are at the end of stage 6. Who will join Day6 for a chance to fight for first place? Unless Day6 somehow matches against both and gets a double kill here.
That was such a close fight, so close. The Kog'Maw was one shot away from death, one auto away, but was able to heal up with the Hand of Justice and Runaan's Hurricane, both proccing the heal. Day6 here, focused on positioning, gonna try to Zephyr, one of the key carries. I imagine he's going for the Orianna here. No, he ends up Zephyring the Yone, which is really good actually, because the Yone was positioned to be on the same side as the Jhin. He probably saw that coming, and is able to buy some more time for his Jhin. Now the Jin's gonna get the ult off, and that Jhin does so much damage. Oh, that Kaisa also able to one-shot the challengers in the backline with that huge ult with Rabadon's Death Cap. Is this a double kill?
It is not. Toric is able to get the win, it looks like, and Day6 survive, or rather, Torek survives to play against Daysec. Taking a look, Guardian Angel on one side. That's actually not bad, especially to drop aggro and potentially disrupt things. But from Daysec's perspective, I mean, this clockwork based composition using Jin as a range carry, Kaisa as the secondary form of cleanup that scales the longer the fight goes as well, because there's Fury Junas and you can concentrate all that damage, and just good utility across the board. The innovators, the front line, it all just works so well together. And even finds the 2-star Yumi. Is there anything else to even roll for Daysec? I think he's just hard capped.
Yeah, his board is looking real strong. I guess he can find a Jace 2 here. He's pretty far away from that. But having 4 Clockwork on Kaisa is so good because Kaisa deals more and more missiles, shoots more and more missiles with every auto attack that Kaisa sends out. So with this, she's not only going to be dealing a ton of physical damage with that Deathblade, but her ult's going to scale really well with that Death Cap too. And it's going to come down to positioning here. But Daysec's comp is just power level looks really, really high. He gets the Zephyr on one of the key frontline units. Torque doesn't have much other frontline to buy time for that Kog'Maw, who's already getting chunked to half.
In the final chapter, gonna stun the back line. Jin is ready to snipe and aim. Too much damage. Daysec does it again. The Russian champion able to get yet another win, his second of the day, and take a lead in the standings.
And this is the end of game 4. Hope you enjoyed it.